Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you have ever worked in tech, you must have heard about a lot of jargons from your product managers and probably unsure what they meant. To be honest, a lot of those jargons are quite useless, but some of them, only some of them, are very useful and can transform almost everyone to be a better product thinker. Hey, my name is Derek. I'm a product manager at Google and I spent nearly a decade in tech. When I first joined Google as a software engineer, I was pretty overwhelmed by all the jargons from a product manager. But luckily, over the decade, I have distilled all those jargons into useful and versatile simple mental models that can help almost everyone to think like a product manager. And today, I would like to share 3 key big ideas in this domain with you. So by the end of this video, you will get all those 3 key ideas and can help you think like a product manager. Okay, so let's get started. The first idea I wanted to tell you is CUJ, Critical User Journey. A critical user journey defines the user's goal, and the task the user carry out to accomplish the goal. This is a very simple but very powerful construct for almost any work in product management. There are many things in the industry that are similar to that. For example, user stories, use cases, and jobs to be done. However, I often found that user story might be a little bit too detailed, and jobs to be done, and it might be too high level. And CUJs kind of sit in the middle, sit in between. So I found it quite useful to use CUJ in a lot of the PM work. And the CUJ is actually popularized by Google's product team. So here we're gonna give you a very interesting example how CUJ works and why this would be useful. So let's get started. In CUJ, and CUJ can be written as the user plus the goal and a bunch of tasks that you carry out to accomplish the goal. So for example, let's take an example of a user. So the way that you usually write CUJ is follow the following format. You can say as a, and then you put in the user, right? This could be a curator, could be a chef, could be a cashier, whatever user that might be using your product. So as a user, you say, I want to, and then you put in your goal here, right? And then you say, so I, and then you carry out a bunch of tasks, right? You just say, well, you have task 1, task 2, task 3, and so on and so forth. And that's sort of the general format of a CUJ, right? So now let's take a very simple example in this format. So let's say, as a boyfriend, I would like to book a table for 2 with my girlfriend for dinner tonight. So that's my goal. So what are the tasks that I need to actually do to actually accomplish my goal? Now, let's say the first task is that I get some inspiration of restaurants that we might want to go tonight. The second task might be I browse some restaurants to narrow down a few. And then the third task might be I message my girlfriend to discuss which one we're gonna go tonight, make a decision. The fourth task might be that I make a booking. And then the last one might be I inform my girlfriend that, hey, the booking is done, or any attendees that the booking is done. Know that I probably use multiple products to accomplish my goal in this user journeys. For example, when I get inspiration, I might be going to my notes or going to Google Maps to figure out what the restaurants that I want to visit, and I might, browse a few photos and reviews on Google Maps to understand. I might just check out also like the booking situation. Is there any slot available tonight that I can book? And then I might message my girlfriend using WhatsApp or message, iMessage, whichever. Email might work too, but it's a little bit formal. Anyways, or we might be having a face-to-face chat, right? So there will be no digital product necessary. Or I might make a phone call. And then finally, when I make a booking, I might be using Resi, or might be using Google Maps, or using Yelp, right? It could be multiple products available. And finally, I inform my girlfriend that, hey, the booking is done. So I might be using either just like a simple message, or I could send a calendar invite to just remind her to remember to leave before, the scheduled time. So look at this. So CUJ is actually less concrete than the actual use case when you talk about products, but it's still very useful. Why? Because I usually find that CUJ will be very useful and also very versatile in three places. One is the PRD. Second is it helps you really do the measurement. And last but not least is helps you to really communicate and align with your stakeholders. So let's go through them. So PRD in general, if you can focus on high level and high value journeys, your PRD will be shorter and also much more clear compared to one that just spell out all the use cases and detailed products and so on and so forth. And you also help the team to align on, hey, what is the most important problem that we should be solving and focus on our time. And finally, when you have a list of CUJs, you can actually give it some priorities like P0, P1, P2, P3 to help prioritize it. And your team might be thinking, hey, which one is more critical than the other? But it's worth to put it in this format so that you can have productive conversation. Now, I just also covered the stakeholder alignment bit, but lastly, I want to talk about a little bit about measurement. So measurement is a lot of times, if you are working on an existing product, you probably already have good metrics to really track how well your product or your new features will do for the users that you test against. However, for new products specifically, it's actually quite difficult to get a lot of metrics or make quantitative judgment on whether your product performs well or not. So a lot of time, I found CUJ is a very useful tool. You just spell out those CUJs, and you can use it as a framework to survey or interview your customers who use that product and ask them to score. You can ask them to score from 1 to 10, whichever you want. But basically, it will help you evaluate whether your product deliver the value to the customer. And the way you do it is by looking at the CUJ scores. Are your CUJs score well or high or low? For the low one, is there any opportunity to actually, move the score up a little bit? So that's why I found it useful. So the second idea I want to talk about is TAM, Total Addressable Market. Total Addressable Market describes the total market opportunity available for your product or service. Normally, you can quantify TAM with revenue, users, or usage. And depending on the problem, you will figure out which metric of TAM or which unit of TAM makes sense for you. So, and by the way, sometimes you can use multiple units for your TAM, and they all make sense. And a lot of times, you can get those TAM by just doing some market research, Googling, or even ask ChatGPT, or just do some research or market analysis paper or something like that. However, a lot of times, you might need to adjust it mentally and really adjust the TAM based on your understanding about the context. So very often, you might just need to do back of envelope calculation or just like some quick math to figure out what is a realistic TAM. And TAM doesn't have to be precise. As long as you get the order of magnitude correct, it's probably fine. And when I say order of magnitude correct, it's like if something is 1 million, you can measure it's like 2 million, 3 million, that's fine. But you shouldn't overestimate it to tens of millions or thousands of millions, or you shouldn't underestimate it as like thousands or hundreds, right? So let's do a very simple example. Let's say if I wanted to come up with a rough estimate on what is the total addressable market, the TAM, for a funeral service in the United States. So how would I actually go about it? Look, you can definitely Google it, that's fine. But for the sake of this exercise, I would just really go through it, like really quick math to understand what it is. But you asked, well, which unit of TAM actually makes sense here. I would say, if you think about it, usage doesn't really make sense because people can only die once. So let's say we rule out usage, and then users make sense, right? So I wanted to know how many people might be passing away in a year. Revenue also makes sense because if I wanted to invest in such a business, I wanted to know how big it can be. So let's just take revenue and number of people, or number of users, if you will, for the death care. Sounds a little bit weird, but let's go about it. By the way, normally usage could be a very good TAM for some cases. For example, social media. So social media, you might be like measuring your total addressable market as like, this amount of people, this number of users, and each user spend maybe 10 minutes per day on your social media service. And can you actually grow that usage from 10 minutes to 30 minutes? That thinking will be useful in some business, but not in our death care business in this case. So then let's just figure out how do we go about estimate the market here. Let's say we do annual revenue for our funeral service. Funeral industry. And it's as simple as basically this equals number of people passing multiplied by dollar per service, kind of. So then I can estimate how many people die. And look, I just do a very quick math here. I don't actually know the exact number, but what I can think from my life experience is that normally life longevity in the United States is like 80 years old. So, and people are more likely to pass away after 60s. So I would say if we have 20% of the United States population are above 60, and they have like, let's say 5% chance to die every year. So this will give me something like 300 million, which is my rough estimate of population in the US, multiplied by 20%, which is the people over 60s, and multiplied by 5%. Basically, how this is the number of people that I believe could die in a year in this group. And then also plus the other 80%, which I don't think they will have a lot of chance to pass away, just probably statistically speaking. So I would put 0.1%. So I multiply this number, and then I roughly thinking about on average cost per service for funeral service probably costs in $20-25 term would be maybe like $8,000. Now total, it's my total guess based on my life experience. So this would roughly give me something like, do the math, be $24 billion, roughly speaking. And actually, this is not very far away from the actual number because I was just looking it up that the actual number is around this. So math works. This is called Fermi problem. It surprisingly works. Like it just works a lot of time because when you do estimation, chances are you overestimate something, you underestimate something. When you do the math together, it's somehow they cancel it all out and you get a order of magnitude correct answer, generally speaking. But why does like TAM or TAM really matter? Well, it matters because it really helps you focus on a bigger problem or big picture, and really helps you. Let's say you have like a perfect CUJ and you can actually satisfy the CUJ really well and build products that make the user really happy. What does that mean? Like if you look at the bigger picture, there are only, let's say, only 100 people have that problem. Even though you solve that problem exactly right, it probably doesn't really move the needle. In this case, you probably need to think about, okay, how big of a problem are we really talking about here? Because that really determines how big and how successful your product can be. So this is the second key idea, TAM, Total Addressable Market. So The last big idea I want to leave you with in product management is MVP, minimum viable product. You probably heard about it 1,000 times already. But a lot of people focus too much on the product, but really in practice, you shouldn't really focus on the product. You should probably focus on the minimum and the viable. Because MVP actually describes the most basic version of a product offering or prototype with just enough features to test some key hypotheses. Know that this is not to really serve your customer to earn a lot of money. Not really. The goal for a successful MVP is to validate or invalidate some hypothesis that you have in mind. And normally, it should be the riskiest hypothesis that you're going to test against with the MVP. An MVP doesn't have to be a fully built out product, and it shouldn't. Most of the time, I would say it could be as simple as some paper prototype, Figma prototype, or even Wizard of Oz prototype. Wizard of Oz prototype basically is a fancy way to say that we use human being behind the scene to simulate or to fake out the actual product experience. And today, with Gen AI and vibe coding, you can probably build out a realistic prototype in probably in hours or in days to really test your riskiest idea. And the motivation behind MVP is really to test your riskiest hypothesis. Because if the riskiest hypothesis is untrue, then you really shouldn't waste your time building out a full product because it probably won't work anyways. So you can learn that lesson and move on to some other hypothesis and try it again. A very cute idea for MVP I would really like to talk about is Zappos. And Zappos, it was an online shoe store. And it was 1999. And the founder of Zappos was thinking, okay, I have an idea. I want to build an online shoe store, just like Amazon. They want to build an online bookstore in the beginning. But let's say I build an online shoe store. And what is the riskiest hypothesis? The riskiest hypothesis back in the day that they have to answer is, if I build this, would people buy shoes online? That is the key hypothesis. So it would be really costly to build out a full product offering of Zappos. If you really want to do it right, you probably need to build out a lot of technical infrastructure, the database, the server, and all kind of like fancy stuff. Not only that, you probably need to make sure that you have like full operations and how do you actually take the order all the way to fulfill it by getting the shoes and manage the inventory and then mail it to the user and then collect the money and payment system and so on and so forth. That would be very, very complex to just test that idea. By the way, they have nothing in the beginning, right? All you want is to test that idea, right? Will people buy shoes online? So the way that they do it is that the founder of Zappos basically go down to the actual physical brick and mortar shoe store and take a bunch of pictures about those shoes and put those online. But a very simple website, that is the MVP, right? To really display all those shoes, and when people take an order, the founder will personally go downstairs, buy the shoes, and put it in a box and mail it to the customer, right? So there's no heavy technical infrastructure behind the scene, but what they were able to test that is with real customers, with real money exchange, and people are willing to buy things online, even though at that point maybe the trust would be an issue. A lot of people might be skeptic about that, but they were able to validate the key hypothesis, and with that, they were able to build out the whole experience and whole product offering later by betting on that right hypothesis that they already validated earlier with MVP. So later, Zappos becomes such a huge success, and they sold it to Amazon with I think 1.3 or 1 point something billion dollars. So why does MVP matter in this case? Personally, I think MVP matters less about a how, but more about the why and the what, right? Why are we doing that? Well, because we wanted to fail fast and we want to test the riskiest hypothesis. If it doesn't work, we want to move on and try something else. the most important thing here is actually the experimentation mindset, right? You would be willing to accept that there's a lot of unknown, but we're going to test the riskiest one and try it out, learn from it, because we're going to learn a lot when we actually put it in front of a real customer, and just try it out. Don't procrastinate, because by the time that you build out everything, you're probably late to the market, even though you are right. And chances are you're probably not right. So do it often, do it early, and I think that's the spirit of MVP. So the 3 key ideas we just talked about, they're all kind of like 3-letter jargons, and they are CUJ, TAM, and MVP. I know they're all kind of 3-letter jargons and kind of weird, but honestly, I feel like those are really, really important tools for you to think like a product manager, and it will really transform you to become a better thinker when it comes to product. The more you use it, I think the more comfortable you will be using those tools and think like a product manager. So if you want to learn more about tech and about product management and get more tools like this, let me know, comment down below, and also check out the next video.